This is a launch PlayStation 3 game, Resistance: Fall of Man, released alongside the console in 2006. And this is The Last of Us, one of the last big heavy hitters to arrive on PlayStation 3 near the end of its life cycle in 2013. Reviewing both of these games, you may notice a stark difference in graphics quality. In fact, the PlayStation 3 may be the only console to showcase such a wide differential in graphics quality. Even comparing to PlayStation 4, you see this launch game, Killzone Shadowfall, with its amazing graphics, and when we compare it to another late life cycle game like Ghost of Tsushima, released in 2020, we can see there's evidence of graphics fidelity improving, but I don't think it's as drastic as the PS3 comparisons. So why is this? Well, that is all thanks to the infamous Cell processor, the computing chip that helped power the PlayStation 3, now widely understood to be a nightmare to develop for. But even with this nightmare, a few developers were able to unlock its potential, and because of those efforts, we have games that seem to be an entire generation apart from the PlayStation 3. So let's discuss a little bit about the Cell processor and use one series as an example to see how understanding this complicated architecture improved its graphics over the generation. Now, I'm no massive tech wizard or a game developer, so we're going to discuss this in a slightly high level, but to understand the Cell processor, you have to throw out the idea of a traditional CPU. Unlike conventional processors that rely on a few powerful cores, the Cell used a radically different architecture. It consisted of one main core called the Power Processing Element, or PPE, and 7 smaller co-processors known as Synergistic Processing Elements, or SPEs. The PPE was a general-purpose core, sort of the manager, if you will, but not particularly powerful by itself. The real muscle came from the SPEs, which were designed for heavy number crunching tasks like physics simulations, AI, and graphics processing. But here's the catch. These SPEs were not easy to use. They didn't run typical code like a regular CPU. Developers had to write custom routines to offload work to the SPEs, and that required low-level programming, parallelization, and manual memory management. Now, if you're like me, and not a video game developer, and didn't understand anything I just said, to dumb it down, developers would have to run 100 lines of code for something that could be done with, let's say, 5 lines of code on another architecture. The 7 SPEs within the console were not all accessible to the developers either, with one being designated for the operating system, meaning developers had a total of 6 SPEs to play with. These SPEs also had limited local memory, requiring a constant juggling of data in and out of them. For studios used to a more traditional PC architecture or even the Xbox 360's simpler multi-core design, this was a huge shift. Porting games to the PlayStation 3 wasn't just hard, it was like rewriting large parts of the game from scratch. And that's why early PS3 games often ran worse than their Xbox 360 counterparts, despite the PS3 being more powerful on paper. It wasn't until later in the PS3's lifecycle that developers really started to master the Cell processor and we began to see the full potential of the hardware. Faced with the Cell's steep learning curve, developers had 2 choices: struggle with the architecture or find a clever workaround. As time went on, more studios opted for the latter and gradually began to understand its complexities. Enter in the studio, Naughty Dog, the first-party Sony developer that you may have heard about. They invested in building a game engine specifically tailored to the PlayStation 3's hardware. This engine was designed from the ground up to take advantage of the Cell's strengths, especially the SPEs. It wasn't all sunshine right away, however, as the first game developed for the PlayStation 3, Uncharted: Drake's Fortune, only utilized about 30% of the Cell's power. But lucky for us, Naughty Dog was persistent. Basically learning by trial and error, the games got better simply because the team spent years figuring out the Cell's quirks, pitfalls, and potential to eventually utilize almost all of the Cell's power. Without even getting into details, just a glimpse at each Uncharted game showcases how Naughty Dog improved their engine and understanding of the Cell's SPEs with each iteration. Naughty Dog learned to break up game logic, physics, and rendering into smaller tasks that could run independently across the SPEs. Offloading these tasks from the GPU required careful scheduling and precise memory control, but in the hands of these great developers, it dramatically boosted graphic fidelity. For example, Uncharted 2 uses the SPEs for everything from character animation to lighting calculations, squeezing out performance that third-party developers simply couldn't match. Or how about their water physics, with them running better simulation in each game, eventually going all out in Uncharted 3. Even the difference in character modeling from Uncharted 1 to 3 almost makes the third entry seem like it's being powered by a PlayStation 3 Pro or some other more powerful hardware. But this is all the same juice being squeezed from the same orange. It's very impressive. What's cool about all this is Sony encouraged collaboration between studios, leading to a kind of shared knowledge base that helped raise the standard across all PlayStation 3 games, especially within their first-party studios. So even games like Resistance with Insomniac Studios saw a major evolution in graphical quality, similar to Uncharted. By the end of the PlayStation 3's lifecycle, developers weren't just surviving the cell, they were thriving with it. But it did come at a cost: higher budgets, longer development times, and more risk. And in a way, that's why the PS4's return to a more standard architecture was so welcomed. It was powerful and easy to use. Looking back, the Cell processor was both a bold experiment and a cautionary tale. On one hand, it represented Sony's ambition to push boundaries of computing power to create a console that was truly ahead of its time. And technically, it was. The Cell processor could do things no other gaming CPU in 2006 could dream of. But power without accessibility, it's only half the equation. For many developers, the Cell felt like less of a gift and more like a gatekeeper. It unintentionally split the PlayStation 3's library into two tiers. You had games that mastered the Cell and looked great, and the ones that simply coped with it and ran terribly. Naughty Dog became the masters, and their games wouldn't have been possible without the Cell's unique architecture. We saw the evolution of their understanding with each game, and by the end of the journey with The Last of Us, we witnessed game graphics that almost seemed to be an entire generation apart from the PlayStation 3. And while Sony moved away from such radical design choices in future consoles, thank God, the Cell remains a symbol of an era where the rules weren't set, and the push for risky innovation above convenience were very, very real. And that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to hit subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and let me know in the comments another gaming franchise on PlayStation 3 where the graphics got better with each iteration. I'll be looking forward down in the comments. Be sure to let me know. Take care, and of course, happy gaming.